Eczacıbaşı CEO, Atalay Gümrah. EY-Parthenon, UK. Head of EY-Parthenon, United Kingdom, Dunne. Turk Telekom CEO, Doany. Atalay Reports Holding CEO, Sani, Şener. Once more, we would like to welcome our moderator and our panel speakers and wish that it will be a very fruitful session for all. I think we're all here. Distinguished guests, welcome. We do have very distinguished speakers, and we will be discussing a very exciting topic. The topic is the future company. I'm very honored to moderate this session. It's a great privilege to be with you. Each of you. It's a great experience. I really would like to thank, and I'm very honored. I would like to mention this. When I speak about the company of future, I personally think that many executives are pointing out a very important fact. How we are going to develop and how we are going to manage it. We do have a lot of questions in our minds. A lot of questions are waiting to be answered. Who will be establishing and what type of leaders we need to have? What will be the profile of those leaders? We will be making some presumptions, some predictions, and we will try to forecast what type of investments are necessary. And those investments are the major part of the future strategies. Every day we are facing and meeting with a new technological development. Those developments are not only changing our business, but our business fashion, our business approach. Industry 4.0, Internet of Things. In the manufacturing industry, they created a huge difference. Artificial intelligence, cloud-based applications, mobile life, and digitalization. This transformation is not only having an impact on us, but also affecting our employees. Our basic priority is human, of course, and serving to humanity. Besides those, sustainability, and of course, making a better world to live in, we will never be giving up this priority, and we will try to shape the future. In today's session, those basic topics will be taken one by one with our distinguished panel speakers. We will be hearing more from you. Of course, all of these speakers are very well-known people. I would like to remind you once more, we do have a success story in the field of CEOs. Borusan Holding CEO Agah Uğur is with us. Eczacıbaşı Group CEO Atalay Gümrah, who is a very pioneering name, one of the biggest consultancy companies, head of EY-Parthenon, United Kingdom. Dunne is with us, and one of the big players of digital transformation, Turk Telekom CEO Doany is with us. And we do have a very important name, a very well-known name. For a long period of time, I'm acquainted with him, and I'm having a lot of respect in him. TAV Airports Holding CEO Sani, Şener. What will be the new business models, and what will be the new organizational structures? I would like to leave the first floor to Dunne. Mr. Dunne, who will be the future's leader, and what type of organizational structures we will be having? what do you project for the future? When we compare and contrast with our present time, what type of differences the future leader needs to have?
The corporation of the future. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me here. I'm honored to be amongst such esteemed fellow panelists. I'd like to start with a reassuring note. The companies of the future are still going to have customers. They're still going to develop products and services that need to be manufactured and delivered through assets, both physical and human, that will need to be managed. So the skills and experiences that you have all developed that have made you all successful up until today are still going to be valid in the future. So we are not yet entirely obsolete. But I do choose the word entirely with a little bit of caution because we cannot be complacent. In my mind, there are two really big themes that are changing the way corporations of the future will need to operate and how leaders of the future will need to think about those businesses. And those two, we've talked about one quite a bit over the last 2 days, which is the whole digitalization theme. And what comes with that is the tsunami of data that corporations now have and the data analytics capabilities that are starting to emerge that will change the way companies do business into the future. The second theme, I think, is around the whole geopolitical instability around the world at the moment, whether it is US tax reforms, whether it is tariff wars, whether it is Chinese industrial policy, whatever it is. We are operating in a global world, and more decisions that corporations take will have to be taken in the context of those bigger geopolitical movements. And so if I think about those two themes and how companies will develop strategy in the future, and strategy is my domain. So thinking historically about strategy development, it has always been a fairly linear process. You start off with a lot of data, you start off with a lot of analytics, you work your way through what the consumer wants, what competitors are doing, what the markets look like, what products and propositions you can bring to market. So the core questions of where to compete and how to compete are still going to be there in the future. But the two differences to them, one is the data that I talked about. So if I take an example of consumer goods companies or retail companies, when looking at developing a strategy, or even if you're looking to invest capital into one of those companies, assessing their performance historically, you would look at databases like Euromonitor or Nielsen, and you would get really good data on a quarterly, monthly basis, but it was always historical. And so it's a little bit like driving a car looking in the rearview mirror. If you think about the data that's available now, there are satellite images of car parks outside every retail outlet on the planet. You can look on a day-to-day basis how many cars are parked in those car parks. You can develop algorithms that translate the numbers of cars in those car parks to real-time data of how those companies are performing. That then gives you the ability to drive a car, just be able to see just beyond your bonnet. But if you add into that artificial intelligence and the ability to do predictive analysis on that kind of data, all of a sudden then you can see the road ahead. And if you're a company that is competing, looking in a race, which all corporations are, and you're looking in a rearview mirror against somebody who's seeing the road ahead, you're going to lose. So the data element of strategy development is going to be huge in the future, and leaders who can think about that is going to be important. We're all Excel generation people. We're all comfortable with Excel spreadsheets. The new data analytics barely touches Excel. There's Alternatif, there's Spotfire, there's all sorts of other programs that I frankly have no idea about. Thankfully, I have people in my team who do. But that is going to change the way we think about analytics. And then the second part of strategy development that I think is important, given the geopolitical theme, is the ability to spot real disruptors. And again, if I think about traditional strategy development, the linear process, at the end of a strategy development, you would typically think about, okay, what might be coming down the pipeline? What black swan events could happen that will completely throw this off? But to be honest, we always used to play lip service to that. In today's environment, with the disruptions that are coming both on a global basis and from the disruptive digital technologies coming in. Those sorts of black swan events are going to become much more commonplace and need to be considered much, much earlier in the strategy development process. And I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, I imagine, but the skills that leaders of the future are going to need to be able to take advantage of that new strategy development process, the new data analytics, the new geopolitical environment, I think that is going to be key to the future.
Çok teşekkürler. Esasında Philip Dunn'ın
Philip Dunne underlined very important aspect. Big data, it's an obligatory condition, and besides that, data is an historical information. For the futuristic estimations, we need to look the strategies and bioanalytics. Bioanalytics are very crucial. It reminded me something. Sani Şener, in a career summit, has presented something very important, and it has taken my attention. Sani Bey states that to the students, dear friends, the deadline of the diplomas is not beyond 4 years. Up until you fill in the new information and knowledge inside those diplomas, they valid. So in this rapidly changing world, we are speaking about Industry 4.0, we are speaking about the changing technology. Sani Bey, what are you going to tell about this? Thank you very much. I really would like to thank the organizers of this event. It is a very successful event. Thank you very much, Kaan Bey, for this question. In order to look at the future, we need to dig into the history. We are speaking about Industry 4.0, but what happened in 1.0, in 2.0, and 3.0, we also need to speak that. When you look in the history, until the Sumerian times, they call it the handcraft. Whenever the science and handcraft have been united, those nations, those countries and communities developed and become wealthy. Sumerians, Egyptians, and Babylonians are like that. The Ottoman Empire's rising period, Greek, and Renaissance and Arab Islam empireships, when you examine them closely, whenever they could combine science and technology, they could become successful, and they have developed. And what is science? We describe science as follows. 14 billion years ago, the God has created us, and there was an explosion. And with this explosion, there has been an energy, time, and space which has appeared. And we call this science physics. 384,000 years later, 384,000 years, energy and also quantum mechanics have started to appear, and those atoms have started to unite, and they have created the molecules, and chemistry has appeared. Later on, some of those organisms have been united, have been combined, and we have started to call it biology. So we are speaking about digitalization 4.0. It is the combination of all those sciences. It is such kind of an industrial revolution. After this moment, when we check the industrial revolutions, science and technology are combining their forces and flying away. In 1760, the first industrial revolution starts with the vapor machines. Thermodynamic practices has taken and started. The first industrial revolution in 1960s, the electricity have appeared and oil has appeared, started to be used. The second industrial revolution started. The third industrial revolution is in 1969 with the electronic chips and transistors. They have started to make use of that. The internet revolution has taken place. The third industrial revolution started. Now we're in the age of fourth industrial revolution. We do have digitalization and how we are going to place our companies. I am going to enter the topic from a different perspective. We cannot say that all of the past industrial revolutions have been completed. We need to look at their pace. We are dealing with the airport business, and we are dealing with the airlines, and they are also dealing with the aircraft manufacturers. It is taking 66 years to build the aircraft, and then comes the automobiles, the cars, and reaching to the 50 million passengers has taken 62 years. Electricity, which is a major actor of the second industrial revolution, has taken 42 years to reach the consumer. TV, in 22 years, reached to 50 million consumers. In the third industrial revolution, we do have a very fast pace. We do have mobile phones. 50 million people have accessed mobile phones in just 12 years. Internet and Facebook, 4 years. Twitter, within 2 years. iPhone technology reached to 2 billion people in 8 years. So this means that digitalization 4.0 has got a very fast pace. And we need to cope with this pace. And we need to be in harmony, and we need to dance together. This is one of the major things. And we are dealing with the airport business. I do have my business development manager, and we are very good in relations with Syria and Turkey, and our Prime Minister visited there in Syrian airport. We will be creating a POT project, and we went to Damascus. And what are you doing in Damascus? They have brought us to the Ministry of Transportation, and we went to the State Aviation Services Department. We went to the directorship of the Prime Ministry. They don't know the privatization process. We went to the ambassador's office. Our Qatar ambassador was the problem solver at those times. We went to the Syrian ambassador, and he told me that, well, you need to speak with Damascus Holding. And at the head of this, Rami Magluf was the CEO. So you can only accomplish it by having cooperation with that. We said they do not know what we will be doing. We said how we can meet with him. They said that he will be finding you. Okay, we said he will be finding us. And we went to a restaurant. We were eating our dinner, and all of a sudden, 3 giant mafia men entered, and they just kneeled my ear, and they said, he is waiting you. And okay, I said, we went to the car. We went on the car and gone to his office. They were having 1980s Mercedes models. We went to a villa surrounded with black suited men carrying Kalashnikovs. And he was waiting us in the meeting room with the Kalashnikov man. We said we will be 150 partners. I said, okay, we will be 50% partner. I said, okay, we won't be giving any money. I said, okay, you won't be giving any money. All of the money will be brought from your side. You will be financing the project. I said, okay. And we will be doing the construction. I said, okay. We have shaken the hands. You're a good businessman. Bravo, he said. We went out. Serkan was calling me from behind. Sani, you accepted everything. What will happen if there will be a deadlock? Well, that Kalashnikov man may resolve everything. So, what I'm trying to tell you is, it happened in 2010. In 2010, where is that artificial intelligence? It is the event of 2010. Where is that machine learning? For this reason, it is still continuing. The old tradition still survives. The Stone Age has not ended because we don't have any more stones. It is still continuing. 17% of the world is still not having any electricity. So they could not experience the second industrial revolution yet. 58% of the world is not using internet. There is no access. So the third industrial revolution has not been experienced by this 58% of people. We still have work to do. So when we are placing the futures companies, we need to be open. We need to open our eye to these previous industrial revolutions. In top technology company, we have 400 computer engineers. We believe in this. And let me tell you another story about this. In our airports, we do have 2 towers. In these 2 towers, one of them is making the flights land. The other one is checking the landing planes and controlling their landing process. Whenever the tower is on is landed, they are making them, direct them to the apron towers. If they come to the bridges, we are taking them in. If they park it on the parking area, then the airport directorship gets the money. So in our contract, the more flights, the planes we receive, we will be getting more money. One day, the company came to me and asked me to write a software. Those 2 towers will be speaking via phone. The airline traffic control, air control tower will be calling is calling from the radio, and they are checking the size of the plane, the wing size of the planes, where they can park the plane. So maximum we were taking 8 planes per day to a single bridge. We said we will be making it faster. I said, okay, do it. How are we going to do it? But we need a budget. What type of budget? We will be making the algorithm to be written by the Istanbul Technical University. They do have a consultancy service. It is $250,000. Leave it aside and let them call each other. Do not develop, I said. And they have convinced me, and they have prepared the Rota program, Rota software. Everything became online. And we have started to take 12 planes and $20 million was the income. This is a very good example for digitalization. And when we are doing this, we should not ignore the Syrian reality. When we are doing business in the developing markets, as the companies working in the developing markets, we need to look very sympathetic to digitalization. We need to look very sympathetic to development. We will be looking at innovation, but we should not forget the past, because all of the industrial revolution still survives. Thank you.
Evet. Sayın Sayın'a çok teşekkür.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Şener. As we are speaking about technology and digitalization, at the end we are still touching to the human. Agah, Uğur, in one of your interviews, you said that there is not a concept which is called single success, single-handed success, and you say that we have to listen to the young generations. As you shape the future of your company, you said that there are differences among the generations, X generations and Y generations. In terms of employing the different generations at the same company, what kind of strategy do you have? And in terms of raising the leaders of the future, what kind of strategies will you employ? Can I actually give my words? Can I actually give my right to speak to Mr. Şener? Well, I believe this was a serious offer. I believe this was a serious offer. Well, after him, it's almost impossible to speak. Well, it was a very hard question, and the question of Mr. Sani was very simple. Well, we have come to a consensus. Last night we drank so much that I couldn't wake up. Sorry. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here. I can actually say a couple of words to each and all of you, and of course, I would like to extend my gratitude to each and all of you. Well, this topic is a topic that all of us is trying to deal with. Well, I can say a couple of things from the issue of the different generations, and there are lots of studies about the differences between the generations. But I also see that these studies are showing that the differences among the generations are not so much, because the generations start to act the same way when they reach to a certain age. Their ambitions for becoming a leader, their skills of adaptation, and their skills for entrepreneurship among X, Y, and Z generations are not very different. It only depends whether we are dealing with a young person or an old person. So we shouldn't categorize people as such, but there is also another fact that we cannot ignore. New generations have certain differences. They are born into technology, they produce technology, they have actually a higher self-trust, and they have different approaches to their careers. And this is called as the patchwork approach. They are patching their gaps gradually. And they also attach significant importance to the experiences. So they have to try first. And they define what they want to do and what they don't want to do. So they actually set up their careers, gradually, step by step. And what strikes our attention the most, they are seeking for a meaning for everything that they do, and they actually want to come to the same place, same situations in terms of the meaning of their job. So the profitability of the company doesn't matter for them. They really want to see the values of the company, and then they are choosing to work for those companies. And we have to adapt ourselves according to that. But this doesn't change anything at all, because the shape of being a leader was the same. When we say a leader should have a main message, and this message should inspire the others. Inspirational leaders, those inspirational leaders are the ones who can actually see the forthcoming, and he also believes in that idea with passion, and he lives actually in the future, and he can actually express his ideals to the people surrounding him, and he actually gives passion to those people. Well, those leaders are not high in number. Actually, they are less than we project. But they might be bosses or workers, it doesn't matter. We have to enable those leaders to live. Because if we can do this, then the differences among generations will not mean anything. An important part of my time is actually spent for that. Am I successful? From time to time, yes. From time to time, no. But I will continue to work on this issue. Of course, each institution has their programs of raising leaders. A need for a startup company to raise leaders may not be necessary, because they just try to survive and they just try to grow fast in the market. A company who only actually buys material and sell products may not need something like that. But if a company is actually selling the profits, may not have that desire to raise leaders. We are a company of 74 years old, and we have an invisible boss. And if we are not inspirational leaders, then this company will die in its own cocoon. Maybe we will not die very fast, but within 20 years we may not be existed. So that's why I'm spending lots of time for that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And your speech is also inspirational. Right now, I would like to ask my question to Flip Dunne. You are in Turkey after a while, and you know Turkey very well, and the Turkish telecommunication sector. You have such an understanding. You said that the telecommunication sector is the sector which is affected by the technologies very fast, but at the same time you have a 5-year plan. So the future company, when you design the company of the future, how can you define the right way of doing the business, and how do you define your strategy?
Thank you. Telecom sector, you know, telecom sector perhaps is one of the first sectors that experienced the impact of so-called digital technology in digital communications. And in fact, when I graduated from university, I understood at that point that, since I was an engineer and a telecom engineer, that what I was working on in my research program will probably not be commercial for 15 to 20 years. So, I mean fully commercial, because it had to go to 2 rounds of modulation standards. So you could see that CDMA would take 15 years. And there were still, TDMA wasn't launched, which is time division multiple access, which were multiple standards. So one was that, and then standardization, which was the GSM, let me say, which gave a standard in the time division multiple access technology. And we knew that that would be superseded by something else, which what you now know as 3G. So if you know that 20 years ahead of time, it's a very difficult thing to decide what to do. So I decided to get out of it, stay out of it completely. And the reason for that was that knowing what can be done technologically makes you, removes you from the human element of business. So I decided to move more into the business side, knowing, of course, or expecting these changes will have severe impact on, let me say, levels of access, speed, data, for example. So I was able to predict most business cycles better than any business people could, because they didn't have the depth of understanding as to where the cost would be for that level of achieving customer expectations on primarily bandwidth. So the bandwidth is the key point, and that's why today, you keep hearing about fiber and everything, and I still also believe that what people talking now about fiber to the home is also wrong. I believe that. But this is not the purpose of this session. So if we look at what businesses should do in general, as opposed to making this a very telecom type discussion, I am very much a little bit like my friend here that says, jump in and say yes to what you have to say yes to and see how we can make it happen. So I'm more of an execution type person, but strategy is in the back of my mind, right? So generally, now going forward, it's a very big challenge when you look at how do you define going forward. When I returned to the company, I returned to Telekom in September 2016. October, November, we're working with the IT teams. We have about 2,000 IT people. And they heard me speak about the things that I thought we should do. I sent a letter to all the employees, and I was trying to motivate them to think, because I believe that if you look 10 years forward, and every person has to be a leader, actually, because you have to survive on your own. I don't think a company is going to give you a job for life, so therefore you have to, now when we say leader, it means you are in control of your own destiny. If you don't do anything, then nothing will happen. So you have to be a leader, and then you lead whoever is working with you. And that's the notion of collaboration, which is the way it will go. And I was speaking about artificial intelligence, and they were thinking like where it should be. And one of the IT persons who does a lot of research, a research type person, did the research and told me that he thought the right place to invest in artificial intelligence is to have this board, artificial intelligence, meaning on regulation. Because he felt that the biggest risk to telecom sector is the future regulation of it. And remember, that's my strength area. So I don't need artificial stupidity to help me with that. So I don't need a machine for that, actually, because it's not that complicated. Now, artificial intelligence and all of these new things, the danger with them is that if you're doing the wrong thing, it just helps you continue doing the wrong thing more efficiently, but still the wrong thing. So you're either a disruptor in a startup doing something new, or you are an existing company that you have to make every person in the company understand what will happen to them and the company if they don't change. You see now, so that's, I think, is the mind frame of people. So everybody has to understand that they probably don't have more than X years ahead, depending on the nature of that business. That X can be an average of 5 years, 7 predictable, in some businesses maybe, if you're lucky, 10. You see? But it's true that doesn't mean you're going to be out of business completely. You will be doing something else. And I think that's the interesting challenge of this technology. So digital transformation and all these new things that enable companies that exist to change and pay a very heavy penalty if they don't. So therefore, people will be part of that equation. And I think more going 5-10 years forward, the world will be many small projects rather than these huge companies that we find. So we shouldn't be, if I want to say one thing, I would always say that forget about the Googles and the Apples and all this stuff. I mean, forget about these things and just do what you need to do where you are, exactly in the space that you are and where you need to go from there. If you get too affected by what these global companies are doing, then it actually sets you off in the wrong direction, because you start thinking that you can emulate something at that scale. These are platform companies, and only one survives. So therefore, once somebody does it, use it or use something else. I think that's the kind of lesson that I learned in my life, and I saw a lot of people wasting a lot of energy in that direction. Of course, if you are an R&D type person, then you wouldn't be in this room. Then that's another subject for another day. Thank you.
Evet, Sayın Atalay Gümrah.
Yes, Mr. Atalay Gümrah, within that perspective, the company of the future, let's speak about it, because you are also managing and holding the group of companies. For the future, what do you think and how do you think the holded companies will evolve, and what do you expect, and do you prepare yourself? Well, I would like to say hi to everyone, and I also would like to thank Capital Magazine for organizing such a successful summit. If you take a closer look to the development of the holding companies, they started after the Second World War, and at those times, Turkey was putting lots of efforts for the industrialization. And the horizon of the entrepreneurs at that time was limited to their own country. And at those times, for Borusan and Eczacıbaşı holding, they were not thinking about going abroad, and they were only focusing on their strong muscles. They wanted to know the Turkish people, the Turkish bureaucracy, and the Turkish country. And by making use of their strong muscles, they actually did lots of projects with the joint ventures. When the geography is limited, then the growth can actually take place in the same geography by doing different jobs. Mr. Nejat, our founder, actually has a very good anecdote, and Mr. Sani actually gave a very good example. And the man is saying that he is really competent in the technology and claiming that I shouldn't have only 50% share, and you have know-how and I have know-who as a skill. And know-how actually doesn't do any good if you do not know the right person, if you do not have the know-who. So that's why we actually started to develop our know-how later on in Turkey. In Eczacıbaşı, for example, we have know-how in many different fields. And of course, in the globe, for example, the Eastern Bloc opened their pathways for the international trade, and the multinational companies and their outlook for the JVs changed. Mergers and acquisitions have started to take place, and they started to increase their operational efficiency. So a country is not the countries are started to be seen as a production center, and some of the countries are started to be seen as a market. And the consolidation of the multinational companies gave us inspiration as well. So we don't see our market limited and bound to the Turkish market only. So in the fields, if we can develop a know-how, then we start to have ambitions of becoming a global brand and being able to maneuver in the foreign markets. And you cannot do this as a single company. For example, Eczacıbaşı Holding has 47 companies in 4 different sectors. And for 47 companies, if I try to be operational in 10 different countries, then I have to have 10 different know-who's. And this is almost impossible. And we should focus what is our core competencies. And this is how our strategy is actually being shaped. At the end of 2016 and at the beginning of 2017, we actually made a portfolio analysis. We tried to make a SWOT analysis and try to understand our strong points. And we try to analyze where these sectors will be going in 2030 and 2040. And what are the competitors. And as Philip said, in which fields we will have this right to earn and right to win, and in which fields and in which geography we are active, and on those fields we try to develop ourselves. And I also realize that many of the companies, those holding companies, will be much more stronger, but they will be active in less fields. Of course, being an investor is also another skill set, but we are managing strategic portfolios. For example, with the Eczacıbaşı construction, we actually have competencies in the tiles and the bathroom products, and for the consumer products and the health products we are quite dominant. We will focus on those fields and we will try to convert our brand into a global brand, and we have the target of becoming much more effective in the long term. And of course the shareholders have a different preference. They, if they believe that they can actually reconstruct themselves in different fields, then this is something else. I mean, we might also make use of corporate venture capitals. So it is really important to define our strong muscles, and with our strong muscles we will be able to compete in the global markets. But if you say that I will do one job in one country, then this is a huge threat, because you will be competing with the companies with the higher turnovers and with the better HR resources. Thank you so much. So, distinguished panelists, first of all, thank you so much. I mean, in terms of the timing, we are very good as well. And thank you so much for using our time. Of course, we have still some time. We will have another round. From Philip Dunne, I would like to continue with Mr. Dunne. Mr. Dunne, for the company of the future, Agah also mentioned we are in need of inspirational leadership, and he underlined this concept. So according to your idea, in order to raise the inspirational leaders, are there certain barriers and how do you overcome them? Thank you.
Well, I think to raise inspirational leaders, one thing they should all do as part of their patchwork career development is go on a negotiating module on how to negotiate with a room full of gun-toting mafia, because I thought that must be a very character-building type of experience. I think there's a couple of things here. We, as well as the individuals of this next generation building their own patchwork careers, experiential patchwork careers, I think corporations need to be much more forward-thinking about how they build their own patchwork leadership teams of the future. There is overwhelming academic research that says the more diverse a team is, the better decisions it will take. And I think planning, particularly if you're going to go overseas and look at new markets overseas, particularly if you need not just inspirational leaders, but leaders who understand the more technical side of things, corporations need to be thinking much more about how they build that jigsaw, that patchwork of leadership skills. And actually Turkey, I think, has got quite an advantage there in the number of family-owned businesses that it has, because it's an opportunity to send off the next generation to develop those skills, those experiences, in the full knowledge that they will come back. One of the things we struggle with in the West is you send off your strongest and brightest people to get that kind of experience, and they go elsewhere. There is another challenge that I just want to talk about, linked to the whole data analytics side, if I bring it back to that. I currently have a robot in the office, and it's still relatively basic in what it can do, but if, for instance, I was going to see a company next week that I didn't really know much about, historically I would ask one of our bright, highly paid graduates to spend a bit of time researching the company, looking at the competitors, doing some analysis of the numbers, and coming back with a 20-page deck that gave me everything I needed to know as a briefing for that meeting. And the bright graduate would go off and do it, and it would take 4 or 5 days, and I would have a nice report. Now I press a button, and 20 seconds later, I have got that report probably to 95% of what the graduate could have done. It's got its limitations because it can only follow certain sectors and it can only do things in a formulaic way. But that then allows the graduate to polish that last 5%. But the challenge here is if we become overwhelmingly obsessed with data and AI, and I know I have been a big advocate of it, it's very hard to turn a robot into an inspirational leader. And so you still have to be bringing in the next generation. Even if a computer could do the job better, you have to bring them in, because the inspirational point that was made so well, that is what drives corporations forwards. That is That is the special sauce that cannot be replicated by a robot yet. And hopefully it'll be many, many years before it can be.
Teşekkürler. Evet Sani Bey, size sormak...
Sani Bey, I would like to turn and ask to you. Actually, you always emphasize a very important topic, looking in the past, learning from them, and reminding them, and you're underlining the learning company, you're underlining the value adding. When you are shaping the futures company, what are you doing in order to bring your employees to the features level? About the human resources, what are you taking into consideration as an important aspect? There are 3 pillars in a company. One of them is the human resource. People issues is one of the main topics. The other one is the technique of the business that you're dealing with, and the other one is the finance. So those 3 pillars needs to go simultaneously. This is the major role and responsibility of a leader. You need to know the technique to carry them together. In human resources, we give great importance for training. We do have 39 different groups. So we do have a different nations. 39 different nations, and employees from different nations makes a very jigsaw puzzle, and information transfer and capital transferring and technology transferring are taking place, but it is not possible to transfer the cultures. You can only just bring them together and create a collage effect. So there is, you need to create a corporate culture, and we could create that corporate culture. And the most important thing is about digitalization is machine learning, but in our structure is contributing to the development of our employees. We are really trying to catch the pace of digitalization, that big data thing. For example, IBM's general manager have come to me, I think he's here. I have told to him that this big data, would you please tell me what is that? We do have enough data. What is that big data? It is only the 10%. There is an unstructured 90% data which is not being unstructured there. We are chasing after that. When we structure those data, we will be having big problems with big data. So education is the crucial point here. You have mentioned, you said that the validation of your diploma is ending within 4 years. I mean, the young generation is so keen about the branded universities. They are chasing after going to the best university. Between the age of 18 and 22, you are going to a school, but it is not valid. It is not having a huge impact. Every 4 years, you need to renew your diploma. It has got a deadline, just like a credit card, to be used. So every 4 years, everything is changing. The world is changing, so they need to renew themselves. They need to update themselves. We give a great importance to this updating process. When we look at the industrial revolutions, the first one was bringing people from agriculture to the rural, from rural to the urban cities, and the second one is industrialization, and there is a contradiction between the labor force and also the capital. In Silicon Valley, they are having the conflict between the talent and capital. It is possible to find OPMs. So the investors are coming and giving you the money. It is easy to fund, but finding the right skill and ability is very important. I would like to say the right talent is something to be found. Everybody is doing everything. A company is carrying on a lot of topics, dealing with a lot of topics. Let me give you an example. Is Apple getting involved in the energy business? Does Microsoft do have hotels? So the funds are doing this. Even the funds have been categorized. They have been segmented. Infrastructural funds, healthcare funds, and educational funds, they have already been categorized. Unfortunately, in Turkey, everybody does everything. So we are not one of this. We are only dealing with the airport business. Since we are doing only the airport business, we are focusing on our business very efficiently. We are keen about our business. If you focus on your business, you can be innovative. If you are present in 10 different businesses, industries, how can you make an innovation? You cannot focus. We are focused in the airport business. And this since then, We are so much keen about our business. Execution is very important. Leaders needs to manage the forest. No, there is no such kind of a statement. You cannot manage a forest which you do not know the type of the trees. We are trying to know each tree type in our company. We have had a project with IBM. We do have our own Facebook and we do have an Instagram account. Now we do have our own application. In-house application. We do have 17 different airports, and in 76 airports we do have our service companies. So we are present in 76 airports, and every news are being followed with our application, just like Facebook. I'm a Black Sea person. Let me tell you a story. One day I was attending a panel session. I was telling about the terminal buildings, I was explaining the launching sections, I was explaining how the passengers are demanding what, and so on. Ryanair CEO has just appeared on the stage. Ryanair is the biggest company, which they do have low-cost carriers structure, and he's saying, well, what is he telling? He's speaking nonsensely. Runway and tent, we can carry all the passengers. He was having such kind of claims. He went on the off the stage and told me, you will be misunderstanding me. But this stage is a theater. We are only making show. Do not take what I have told you seriously. This is a stage and this is a theater, so you don't have to believe what I say. So what I would like, Temel, the Black Sea man, has become a doctor and comes to Trabzon, and everyone welcomed him, and they have celebrated his doctorship. And Temel was very excited because next day he would be starting to work at a hospital. If you diagnose the right with the right diagnosis, the rest of your career life will be successful. So he was keen about the first diagnostic of his patient. So he is facing with his first patient, and the patient comes, well, come and check your uncle. Your uncle is ill. What are you doing here? Why are you waiting the patients here? And he's going and checking Uncle Dursun. How are you? Oh, I have got diarrhea, my boy. And he said, okay, he has got diarrhea, so I'm going to prescribe you a disease. But he has forgotten the medicine for diarrhea, so he's prescribing a Xanax for him. And he is going his home, and the next morning is coming to Uncle Dursun's house. He is also bringing the medicine. And Zehra teyze, where is Uncle Dursun? He went to the cafe, she says. And he's going to the cafe and checking him, and he's playing. Okay, Dursun, Uncle Dursun, how are you? Well, I'm inside the shit, but I am not taking off my hat. I mean, I do not care about it at all, which medicine you have given me. So, either you swim in the shit, if you do not care about it, there is no problem. So you need to be keen about the work that you're doing. Agah, you have warned me. I have warned you too. I will be directly asking my question to Paul Dunne. Okay. I wonder how did they translate it to you? I wonder whether you could understand or not. Did you understand the study? I really wonder about that. Okay, Mr. Doany, my question is as follows. We are not expecting a story from you. We are not expecting a story from you. According to you, what is the prototype for the future leader? And are we going to have differentiation according to the different businesses within the leadership? Are we going to have different leadership types?
Answering general questions is very difficult, especially in a short time, but I would say in a short time this, I think first of all that anything done in a company needs a multidisciplinary team, because increasingly the complexity of whether it's data, whether it's technology, whether it's or something else, other challenge requires inputs from multi-sources. So therefore, project teams and how they get put together in companies and how these teams can be inspired is a leadership job, which is probably one of the most important parts of the change and transformation of that company. Therefore, that project manager is a leader for what he's doing in that company. The value of what that project manager is doing could be important for a year or two or for a much longer period of time. So this is a non-hierarchical leadership, let me say, structure. It's collaborative. You need tools also to put people together who have things in common so that they synergize easier, especially in large companies. So you can match them, because we do, for example, in a company of this size, for example, you're doing thousands of projects. So therefore, and there are 34,000 people working. And therefore, this is the leadership that can transform. If people think that, you know, one leader can make this company work, then you compare that one leader with another one. But if you can trickle that down, that every person looks to what he or she needs to do with their team, then you can really make enormous change, as opposed to basically looking up to please your boss, whatever is hierarchically above your head. And that's why project-based activity, I believe, in collaborative teams is the most transformative and exciting thing in a company, so that in a simple sense, when you go to bed, you need to know exactly why you're resting. What will you do the next day, you see? And that doesn't come in a large organization by having a strong leader, the hierarchical stuff, which has to be there as well. So the future is collaborative. In a simple sense, relating to what you said, actually, my daughter, as a simple personal thing, but interesting. So my daughter studied, she did a master's in an MA in language and literature, English. And when she finished that, she's very kind of like legally minded, analytically minded, and so she decided to study law, English law. Her first degree was in Scotland, so she went to UK, to London, to start a master's in law. 3 to 4 months into, maybe maximum 6 months, I can't recall exactly, she decided to drop out. And I was very happy for her to have made that decision. And I didn't need to know why. But the reason she gave me is that artificial intelligence will be better than whatever I can be as a lawyer. So I'm not going to do this. And she just left, which is similar to what you were just saying. So this is that generation, frankly, and we don't know very much what they will need to endure. But one thing we know is that their life will be more difficult. They have to work a lot more jobs and much more teams and collaborate. Therefore, you know, this notion of one leader is a dangerous concept. When people look at CEOs and something, in fact, they need to have thousands of leaders in their companies to succeed. So the worst thing to do is to idealize an important person. Like Elon Musk, for example. He's not a leader. He's more than a leader, actually, you see. He's an innovator. He's doing something more than leadership. But in his companies, like when he says in the boring company, the so-called boring company, which is also, he jokes that it's boring, he spends 2% of his time. When you hear him talking about it, you think that's the only thing he's doing. But that's not because he's doing it, because the people working with him are doing that. So he passes that on. You see, that's the trick, I think. Thank you.
Evet. Son iki sorumuza geçiyorum. Atalay Bey. Agah Bey.
Last two questions. Mr. Agah already spoke about it. In terms of raising the leader of the future, Mr. Agah said that I actually allocate a lot of my time for raising the leader of the future. For the future of the leader, what do you do in your own schedule? Well, as the managers, our important priority is to predict the future, and based on those predictions, we are trying to strengthen the muscles of our company. Well, maybe Sani gave a very good example, because future is not a target. You can speak about EBITDA target or sales target. Everything is clear, but for the future, nothing is clear, and nothing is static and fixed. How can we define the future? First of all, we are trying to use the common language when we try to define the future. We have a concept which is called future feed. And approximately 250 of our personnel actually took this program. It's just like the talent pool, but we call it future feed. As Philip said, a couple of those personnel, as you know, go to the other companies. Well, anyway, we have, for example, 150 people in our company. We are trying to prepare them for the future so that they can actually make use of the threats and the opportunities which are awaiting us for the future. And we are actively enrolled in this process. It's just like preparing a curriculum, because each day the contents for the future are changing. In the past, we were focusing on the operational efficiency, but these days we are focusing on the data usage and the competition, because the competition is not coming from our sector, from the other sectors. For example, Amazon founders were not booksellers, and the Uber founder was not a taxi driver, but they actually had a huge impact on the industry. So we are focusing on the fields in which we cannot give better, good services, so that our personnel will be able to see those missing points and they can actually improve it. Yesterday, from Doany Holding Company, Ms. Begum Han said that. She said that the role of the woman in the labor force is not very strong, and in order to tackle this problem, we initiated a program last year, and together with the 40 women, we chose them and we try to empower them in their careers. And I am working as a mentor to a couple of those ladies. Well, the most limited resource is the talent, is the skill set, and we are trying to find the skillful personnel and talented people, and we can also involve the women skills into the system, so that we can also make use of the other side of the coin, and that's what we are actually spending our time for. Mr. Agah, my last question will be addressing you. At the end of the day, new ideas and innovations will be flourishing inside of your ecosystem. What kind of investment do you do for the innovations, and how do you manage it? I am the only barrier between you and the lunch. I'm aware of that, so I will not speak even further, because I can speak for this topic hours and hours, but I'll keep it short. Well, we cannot say that a company 74 years old came to this point without any innovation. But 5 years ago, on the ad hoc basis, starting from that innovation culture, ad hoc based innovation culture, we started to embrace innovation as a part of our DNA. And I am the leader of this journey, because if I'm not the leader of this journey to have this innovation culture in our DNA, we are not successful, because you have to take courageous decisions if you would like to implement such an ambitious target. First of all, when we tried to innovate ourselves for the first couple of years, we were unsuccessful, because thousands of people are still using Six Sigma as a methodology. But innovation is not happening when you collect new ideas only. So you have to have ingredients. And one of those ingredients is the hunger. You have to be hungry. You should take a look at the market, and you should see a gap on the market, and as a reflex, your company should feel that hunger to fill this gap in the market. So the innovation cannot actually take place if two people share their ideas through mail, and you should have a pain. You should feel this pain, and you should focus on the topics in which you feel the pain. So we said that, and Mr. Sani also said it very rightly. We have to do the job that we know it very well. And we have a vision for 2024. So we actually established our vision for 10 years later in 2014. For us, sectors do not matter. For us, what matters is how our strong muscles can create a difference in those sectors. We are trying to define it, and we are focusing on that. Being the BMW distributor is actually a very sexy job, and you can actually earn a lot of money, but this is not our job. We are a B2B company, and we are trying to provide advantages for our businessmen, not only for once, every day, every single year we are doing this, and that's how we are successful. So if our strong muscles can be beneficial in a sector, then we are going for it. First of all, we are trying to understand the gaps in the sector and trying to answer to that gap technologically and in a sophisticated manner, and there are huge dramatic differences in for a need of the automobile company and for a galvanized steel producers. And even if you are a B2B company, for some sectors we are very expensive and we cannot give service to them, and sometimes people are defining us as a smart ass, and especially in the small and medium scaled enterprises. Even if we improve ourselves in certain fields, we cannot actually be successful unless we can create a destructive innovation. And on those fields, in certain fields, for example, we didn't have any know-how. And all of our innovation comes from the market platform, from the being the intermediators in the platforms of multi-buyers and multi-sellers. And Borusan is actually having a good reputation in those fields, and we are trying to improve ourselves in those fields. And we realized and understood that we are not going to be successful alone. So we actually cooperated with one of the most important consultancy company from Boston. And right now, we created 6 startup company. And our internal entrepreneurship actually converted into new startups. But one of those startups have been closed. And you have to fail early when you are creating a startup in a cost-effective manner. The other 4 startup companies are performing quite well, but this is also something very hard to manage, because the current structure is actually eating the new startup companies as a breakfast. So it is really important for us to change our human profile. Finding the right talent is really hard. Digital born and digital learned. We don't have the people who actually is born to the digital age. So we couldn't find those people, and we, especially for the big companies, the system is going on and the system is proceeding. Especially in the digital age, you have to find the right person with the right hunger and with the right pain. And in addition to that, especially in the fields that we choose, we have to make use of our asymmetrical power. What I mean by saying that? We said that we cannot do business with the SMEs, but big companies, Ford, Philip Morris, IKEA, those companies are our clients. But with thanks to them, we are hiring 2,700 trucks each day, with thanks to them. So we are actually creating a market, a platform. On the other side of it exist the SMEs. So you have to use our digitalization techniques for this platform as well. But it is not happening. Although the main company is aware of this, and I am not easily accepting if the things are not things are done without my knowledge, but I mean, we couldn't actually transfer the power of those car rent companies to our own business, and we have to change our partner. So we have to make use of our asymmetrical power, and we have to enable this asymmetrical power for the use of SMEs, and this is actually the most challenging part. And in order to realize this, you have to take really cruel and courageous decisions. Only the leaders can take those decisions. Thank you so much. Well, distinguished participants and panelists, I would like to say 2 words before closing the session. As this alternative bank, we actually introduced our new face and our logo. We are changing our mission. Our only aim is to help the companies in their journeys. We are trying to add value to them. As the CEO of Alternatif Bank, we also have to work a lot because our panelists have spoken not only for today but the future of Turkey. They are very important leaders who can actually bring Turkey to very good places. Thank you very much for your speeches. Thank you so much.
Değerli panelistlerim.
We would like to thank to our distinguished panelists, distinguished participants, and distinguished guests. We will have the lunch break, and we will show you this Otoyol movie, and we will come back at 2:20, and we will have Stars of Region award ceremony at the end of our panel, and we will actually applaud our youngsters. Thank you very much, and bon appetit.
Audio Jungle.